Hi, my name is Wes Cutting. So I work with Tyler Garlick. He presented last month. We're the two full-time instructors at Helio Training. So we teach JavaScript, basically teaching full-stack web development using Node. What I wanted to go over tonight, so it didn't get updated. Tyler taught NPM packages last month. I'm going to be going over filter map reduce. So there are array functions built into JavaScript. To kind of start that journey off, we're going to kind of dissect what an array is real quick, how to read an array, what is an array, what goes into it, how to interpret it, and then just go through various examples of filtering and mapping and reducing. So yeah, as Dax had said, if there's any questions, just feel free to pipe up. Dustin, try and stay on topic, please. So the two require, like it's not really required, but if you want to follow along, we've got a replit. So last month, Tyler talked about how you can basically write Node commands directly into Node itself and get output directly from the console. So just kind of this sort of setup just allows me to run with it. There are other various things you could use. You could use CodePen. You can use JS bin. There's a lot of different variety there. This one's Tyler's implementation that he kind of set up for tonight. But if you wanted to go ahead and sign up to follow along, I'm going to be talking for a second before I dive into it. The next thing that I had pulled up was this GitHub repo. It is just a collection of JSON data sets. For those of you that don't know what JSON is, it's JavaScript object notation. It's just a way of, it's an easier way to represent data using JavaScript. What we're going to be doing is utilizing array of JSONs. So most of these are going to be in format. So if I go, there's one in here. Let's do movies. Showtime. OK. So this is just a collection of JSON elements. So an array, who can tell me what an array is? Is anybody familiar with that term? Yeah. Yeah. It's just a collection of data. In strongly typed languages like C# and Java, you have to store the same type of object. So if it's an array of strings, only strings can be put in there. If it's an array of numbers, only numbers can go in there. It's very much tied to the type. In JavaScript, it doesn't really matter. You can throw whatever the heck you want in there, and it will respond in kind. So if I wanted to, so those are all strings. If I wanted to actually store some numbers in there, if I wanted to store an object in here, give it x equals 5. So that's JSON notation. I can execute that. It stores everything just fine for me under the hood. JavaScript doesn't really care what type of data is stored in this collection. It just allows you to throw stuff into a collection. The main difference between, say, JSON and an array, they both can be described as ways to store data. JSON is what's known is a key value system. So the x represents its key, and the 5 is the value assigned to that key. So if I wanted to look up the value of 5, I'd have to reference it via the key x. Now for arrays, they kind of are key value pairs, but the key is assigned via the index. Who's familiar with the term index? Okay, what is an index? It's where it's at in the array. It's the position. Yeah. Yeah, it's 0 based. So the first position in the array, so first position is 0, second is 1, so on and so forth. So there are 6 elements in this array, meaning the last index is 5. So the key is assigned based off of its index. So if I wanted to look up the value in that array, I would have to provide its index. So if I wanted to grab out of blah being that array, if I wanted to grab the JSON itself, I'd use square brackets to pull it out, and I'd give it, just pipe in an index. So index 5 with 6 elements just gives me that JSON object. So all this is just an array of JSON. So if I grab this guy, Go all the way there. So it's got a title, a year, director, cast, genre, notes. So all of the JSON objects that are stored in that collection, because it's from a trusted source, I can assume that all of those JSON objects, even though there's no value, all of those JSON objects have those keys. So despite there's no value stored in director, that key is still there represented in that object. So all of the objects inside of this collection, while it may not have all the right values or all the values filled in, it will have those keys so I can pull them out and reference them. That'll become important when I start doing filter. So for that, so the other thing to note is that like JSON, arrays are comma separated. So you know it's a new entry in the array. It's a new position in the array when there's a comma. If I wanted to artificially inflate this array with more indices, JavaScript allows me to just add more commas. And then if I call out blah specifically, it just has 4 empty items or undefined. So those come back as undefined or empty positions in the array. So there's nothing there, but I want some filler. But the length of the array has increased, yes. Yeah, by 4. So if I do .length on this, because it's a property all arrays have, so length actually shows me how many items are in the array. So the length, that is a good thing to note. The length has increased. And if I decrease it back, it goes back to 6. Okay. So that's kind of the core concept of arrays. I'm going to, let's see if I can clutter this. Am I able to, Tyler, am I able to export and import with various files in here? Okay, let's try it. Okay, so we're going to add a new file here. I'm just going to call it movies.js. I'm going to do an export default here, and I'm just going to pipe in that array. Let's see real quick if this will work. So, movie from movie, cool, and movie.length. And let's see, moment of truth. Is it the import very first? Is that, yep, okay, you are correct. Huh? It's probably not Babelifying, okay. Yep. You are correct, thank you. And it's saving.
There's a really nice Chrome extension that'll make your JSON look pretty.
Really?
It's just called JSON View.
Wow.
It's useful to actually look at the JSON view to tell what's happening.
JSON view. Okay. Then to the Chrome extensions. Fantastic. We shall wait a second. Oh man. I know. That's what I get. So let's no. More tools, extensions. You said JSON view?
Yeah. So you should be able to say JSON.
There's probably half a dozen.
Oh yeah.
It's called JSON View Notes, no spaces, capital, support, the word JSON. It's that second one.
Second one? JSONview.com.
Let me check.
Please do. Has this?
Oh no, it's by Gildas.
Yeah. Okay. Add extension.
Yeah, that second one looks like an Untitled.
Yup. Okay. So, oh, it's not even letting me close it. There we go. Aha, okay. So I'm going to just delete that because that's apparently easier than trying to rename it. It's an easier command, right? Okay. And then this guy comes over here. And so how do you work with this extension? Is it this one?
Well, you probably can't do it in this screen. You have to do it in that screen.
It's got a lot of data in it. Because it's movies from 1900 to 2016. It's a big data set. There we go. Oh, look at oh man. Where have you been all of my life? I like that. Okay, thank you. Pro tip, use this. Cool. Huh? Just refreshed it. So it's a JSON file by itself. So part of from the actual the GitHub itself had links out to various JSON. So what I ended up doing to get to those is JSON datasets GitHub, and it was just the first one. So it has a variety of different lists. Like some of these actually, I think, link out to some APIs. But then I just searched for movies, and yep, it took a second to process it and gave me that. So, yep. So movies. Acquire. Okay. Yep, thank you. Boom. Are you going to actually work this time? Has a lot of data. It's surprising that it would take that long. Okay, I might just have to copy in some data real quick then. Stop. Okay, so let's just grab a couple decades worth of movies. Nope, still in 2015. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Okay, back over here. So I'm going to swap this guy out. Go away, movies. You are becoming movies. And so I'm going to build out an array real quick. Just kind of the same experience with blah. The main notation and the syntax for arrays end up being the square brackets. So this is an empty array. Movies.length, come back 0. I'm just going to delete this because it might be taking forever because of it. So there's nothing in movies right now. So I just did a raw copy paste. I'm going to scroll down here and rerun this, see how many movies we got. Okay, we got 73 movies. That should be fun. Okay, so if I want to grab a particular movie, I know it's 73. So if I grab 73, what are we expecting back? Undefined. Most other languages will complain at you that it's gone out of bounds. JavaScript doesn't really care. It's your fault that you went into undefined territory. So it'll let you go into that. Like you can even, pretty sure, plug in a negative, and it'll still just kick back undefined. I'm not even sure how to get to a negative index, if you can assign a negative index. I haven't tried to do that. If you want to experiment with that, feel free. But yeah, if I wanted to grab that last one that has Warner Brothers in it, I'd actually grab 72. Because that's the last position. It's typically known as the nth position, n representing the number. Well, yeah, the nth position, the length, the count. Okay. So what I've used to learn all the variety of functions that go into JavaScript just in general, and specifically arrays, is the MDN. Everybody here I think should be familiar with the MDN. If you're not, it's just the developer.mozilla.org. I just Googled MDN array, and it was the first link here. What it kind of gives us is a selection of functions to utilize. Because it is an alternate topic for another day, I'm just going to gloss over the .prototype. It has to do with JavaScript's inheritance mechanisms and how it kind of attaches functionality to objects. So that's kind of the gloss over. But I've got 73 items in my array. And I say I want to, so let's see what kind of movies we've got. Where'd I go? Over here. Okay, so I go all the way back to 2015, and this movie goes to 2016. Okay, so if I want to grab only movies that are in 2016, what kind of function, if anybody's familiar with arrays, what kind of function do you think I would want to grab here? What would be a convenient way to like gold pen out down to the 2016 movies? Filter. Yeah, it's the first step in that process. So the reason why, so I kind of go as filter map reduce, is if you start with filter, you're reducing the amount, or so not actually reducing, that would be overloading that word. You're narrowing down your focus. So instead of operating on a data set of 73, I might be operating on half of that. So it makes the other functions run a little bit quicker, because if you saw we had a couple thousand movies throughout the decades, that's a lot of data to sort through. So if I'm wanting to perform other operations on it, I want to reduce the data set on it. I want to narrow that field of focus. So I'm going to go into filter and just kind of read through it. So it creates a new array with all of the elements that pass the test. So the simple example here is just kind of takes a collection of words. You execute a filter function on it. And this takes in kind of an anonymous function. So this is the arrow syntax for function. Takes in a single parameter, in this case, word. So words is the collection. Filter will operate on every element in that collection. And part of the variables that get passed into this anonymous function, the first one there, is the current element. So for the 6 words in words, every time filter encounters a new element in the array, it'll pass it into this function, given the name word. And what ends up happening is it has to pass this test. So this condition, word.length is greater than 6. So if the element passes it, that value gets stored into the result. So this becomes a new array. So if I wanted to grab all of the, so let's grab, let's say, const, how do you spell 20? 2016ers. So I'm going to grab movies.filter, and I'm just going to call it movie, passing into a function here. Movie.year equals 2016. Yep, correct. Thank you. And I would just want to grab, so correct. Yep. And even if it was represented as a string, it's truthy. So it's a content comparison. The triple equals is a content and a type comparison. And then there's just a way to do a type comparison using the type of keyword. But JavaScript will actually do its best to convert 2016 to a string and then do a content comparison against that, assuming movie.year was stored as a string. Yeah, there's a variety of philosophies. In this sake, you can do it either way. It was I knew it was a string or a number, so I just left it as that. I mean, he even had to remind me, so because I'd missed it. So length. So let's do dot. I'm just going to do a dot length on these guys. So I still have movies because movies is unaffected by what I'm doing here. I'm filtering out and creating a new array, which ends up being the 2016ers. Dot length. Run. So there's only 24 movies in this collection that take place in 2016 out of the 73 that I grabbed. If I flipped it, so the name is no longer self-documenting, but it's 49. So 49 plus 24, 24 got us that way? Yeah. So now that I've filtered down, so let's see what we can grab. What's it? The Jungle Book. Did that come out in 2016? Wow. Yeah. It just didn't seem that long ago, but wow. So we've got the length we filtered. So the next order of business would be to map it. Now let's take a look of what we're going through. So I'm going to leave this one open. Let's grab what map does. So this one also creates a new array. So we're not going to have to worry about, movies will remain intact, which is good. So some of these functions are destructive of the first array, meaning they actually do perform alterations to that array. Filter, map, and reduce do not. They create their own values as a separate assignment. So it's good to note. It's just you want to make sure that there's some functions here off to the left that will actually alter the original content. These will not. They'll just kind of process that content and go from there. Okay. So a map, the provided function, so can anybody actually understand that? Of a provided function on every element in the calling array. Creates a new array.
So with maps, you can pass a value, or pass a value in a function.
Yeah.
And it does that function equals value.
Yeah.
I know that's kind of repeating.
Yeah, I was just drawn to light that this documentation, though I go to it and reference it a lot, it's not exactly perfect in its articulation of what it's trying to do. That's where I like kind of the examples below it. So if you notice, you've got 1, 4, 9, 16. So this is performing an action on line 4 using map. And that's just multiplying the incoming value, which in this case is x. So similar to the filter, it's going to loop over the collection. It's going to go through the entire collection and pump in the value of the element it finds. So array 1, every time it hits a new index, it'll give it to x, or give it to the function, which assigns the key of x, and it uses it in that function. So it multiplies the value by 2 and returns a new array, map1. And that expected output ends up being 2, 8, 34. You can multiply however you want. I mean, if you wanted to, you could be weird. Just did A to everything. So it's the same sort of functions and configurations you have. So what I've done in the past, so specifically with React, you can do it with a variety of other different components, whatever JavaScript you want to pull into it. I take my JSON object, or my array of JSON, I filter it down to the specific data I want, and then I use a map function to take it from JSON into the component I need it to display as. So if I was displaying movies, I'd have a movie component that would kind of allow you to flush out what it goes into, display that in HTML and CSS. That's already built out and defined somewhere. But every time it hits a new element in that filtered collection, so I've reduced it down to the movies in 2016. And say, for example, say I want to map it out. Let's do this. Titles. So I'm going to take 2016ers, and I'm going to map. That's a lot of garbly goop. Actually, so yeah, I can deconstruct that value, but I'm going to give it a value. So this is another movie and piped into a function. So all I really want here, if I can scroll up a bit, I want to, in my titles, my new array, I just want a collection of JSON objects that have only the title property. Can anybody take a gander at what I'd write over here? What would this function actually do? You could return movie.title. Yeah, it'd be a new object is what I'm looking for. Yeah. And then I would just give it the title. So let's just title. And then give it movie.title. Can I make this? Boom. Oh. Boom. Oh. Okay. And now, if I do a console.log, what's the expected return here? 24. Because I haven't. That is true. Thank you.
Yes.
Yep. So, kind of a note on syntax, and then I need to do one to close it. With ES6, the arrow function allows you to. In most languages and in previous iterations of JavaScript, you had to close off your function inside of curly braces and explicitly use the return keyword if you wanted to return value. The arrow function gives you shorthand. So this ends up becoming shorthand for this if I really wanted to flush this out. Oh, I missed a brace. And then all the way there. So this function has the opening of curly braces that you typically see in functions. But because the only thing I'm doing is returning some value there, I can just eliminate the opening and curling bracelet here, get rid of return, and just leave that value. The downside to returning JSON is because it also utilizes curly braces, I needed the parentheses to denote that that was what I was returning. So so if I run, yeah, that'll work. If I wrap this in parentheses, because I'm just defining the scope of what the return keyword is actually giving back to me, that'll still work. And then I'm able to do some syntactic sugar here. And this is why we're all diabetic on the inside, is because languages give us the sugar. And we run. So I haven't narrowed down my field of focus like filter. So that's why I get 24, 24, because there's still 24 of it. But if I actually grab so there's 24, let me grab 22 here. And I'm going to grab 22 here and run it. So I get, wow, look at that, Jungle Book. Spot on. So Jungle Book, I get the full detail of the object. And then with titles, I actually just have an object with the property in it of title. So this allows us to kind of reduce the amount of data we're passing around. Because we're nickel and diming ourselves on network traffic. So instead of constantly sending information across the wire, so that's where in your API, if you're hosting an API and this is the UI, the user on the front end says, I want to only see movies in 2016. The dumb thing to do would be to take all of the movies out of your database, send it to the front end across the network and say, hey, you figure out what movie is 2016. What you're going to do instead is potentially grab the data set. If it's a flat file, meaning it's just that JSON file, you're going to grab all of that into memory on JavaScript. In JavaScript, you're going to filter it down and they've provided the search parameters. I want all the titles of the movies in 2016, and that's the UI input that they've requested from the API. The only thing you need to send back is 24 JSON items with one field in it, instead of 24 with 7 or 8. Yeah.
You guys teach Node?
Yes. Yeah.
If we weren't using that, we would be doing some sort of like SQL query to
Yeah.
our object.
Yeah. So it's the same concept with SQL. Like you're not just doing a select star from the table and pulling the entire table back. You're filtering down what you need. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And that was just one example of how you're reducing or like narrowing down the field. Yeah. So Everybody with me so far? Cool. And so one thing that, so this data set may or may not be ideal for a reduce. Primarily, so the one thing that I've reduced, you can total things out. Basically, if there's a single item in the collection, you can strip away the array and just focus on the object itself. So let me grab this actually and kind of piece it apart. So reduce, the final piece of this puzzle, has this concept of an accumulator and a current value. So the method applies a function against an accumulator in each element in the array and reduces it to a single value. So reducer here, const reducer, is not going to be an array. It's just going to be a single value. Whatever that value ends up being is kind of up to you based on, again, what you provide into the function. So this reducer is separating it out so that this is no longer anonymous. They could have plugged this into here in reducer, but it just kind of separates it onto multiple lines. The accumulator here is going to stick with you for each iteration. Yeah, question?
It's something that I like to point out to my students is how we mentioned how the definitions from MDN can be a bit confusing.
Mm-hmm.
So MDN is written by pretty much the creators of JavaScript in a lot of ways. So I recommend definitely preschool if you're learning, because they'll use a lot simpler language. A lot of the times it's easier to understand. If you got a pretty good hold, then MDN gives you a little bit more meat when you're telling you about built-in methods or functions, more in-depth things. But I like to be preschools if you're just learning out. They're pretty simple in their explanations.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt that. Does preschools have reviews? Yeah, they've got like very
Is there a search bar here?
probably at the very bottom on the left column.
And then just go down, let's give you a definition up a little bit. So it gives you some things there.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Yeah.
got two resources you can go between the two.
Yeah, and that's what I juggle between, to be quite honest. Yeah.
I want to point something out. I just learned this the other day. It says it reduces the array to a single value. That single value can be a single array. So you can actually use reduce
Yeah.
to do basically anything. You can reproduce math and filter with reduce. But the single value is a little bit misleading.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
It seems like it has to be like a single primitive value, but it can also be a single array.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I guess you could use if you're.
Because the accumulator, you can just like
Mhm.
push to the accumulator every time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, if the
Right.
accumulator ends up being an array, okay.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
First value is an array,
Mhm.
empty array, and you push to it every single time.
See, and I've always kind of done it to where if you filter down to one item, so you filter and map, and then you basically use reduce to shake away the array because all you do is return the accumulator,
Yeah.
or return the current value. So that's actually that's a good point.
Does reduce also take like a starting point?
Yeah.
Actually, this doesn't say
So the syntax ends up kind of down here.
initial value.
Yeah, so total, which ends up being the accumulator, current value, current index, and then the array itself.
Which nobody ever passes the array. You can do also map
Yeah.
as well, but nobody
Yeah, I've honestly never gotten past current value.
directly on the array.
Yeah. For those of you that have used reduced, how many times have you used current index? Yeah. Yeah. The whole point, so it's kind of tangent on topic. The move away to these functions, despite all of these can be really, you can use for loops and while loops to achieve relatively the same thing of what they're doing, but these are going to be safer operations because you don't have, it gets into the whole async await orphaning code situation. Where if for example, if I make a request to my API and it goes off in a for loop and it's performing an operation on 100,000 items, there's a potential that the array could return a response before that data set is done processing. So then you already have a response with nothing in it, or malformed data of some type, and then your API is still churning away on the for loop, trying to process the 100,000 entries, and then it executes and doesn't know where to go, and your system's in a wonky state. It gets out of sync. So what these functions do is what they do is they help you perform operations in a safe manner so that the statements will finish executing before it just orphans off the operation. You still have to use kind of async in a way to process things a bit, but it's safer and it's cleaner looking code. Instead of trying to decipher what a for loop looks like and what all that gets into, like you can just look at the function name and it kind of should tell you like, oh, it's filter, it's map, it's reduce, it's for each, pop, push. It relies on these functions to perform safe operations under the hood. So back to this guy. So there's not necessarily a nice, clean way to show what a reduce kind of will do here. I guess I could do this. Huh? Yeah, okay. Well, so I minus the fact I need to do title, and we're going to grab year here. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to total up all the years. So I'm going to run this again. So yeah, 2016. I'm just going to total up all the years. So total years. Titles. That's gonna bug me. Hang on a sec. Sorry, guys. Years dot reduce. Okay, and then the reducer just for syntax. That is totally the filter. You are a map, and there we go. I'm just gonna go like this. Why write your own code when you can copy paste other people's code? Where'd we go? Okay. I'm not even sure I need that there. The terminating statement. Verify. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Yeah.
You don't specify the initial value. Does it start out at 0? So it starts off at the first object.
Yeah.
Starts out as the first item.
At index 1.
Okay.
Yeah, so it starts at index 0. If it, yeah.
Which is usually what you want.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's once I get into this territory, there's very little sorting that's going on at this point. Most of the sorting, from my experience, has happened more in the database and the API, how it requests the data. So if there's any sorting that goes on, that's where you start requiring index and positioning and caring where its placement is. For most of this stuff, it's just kind of, no, I just want to perform it on every single item in the collection. So that should, because it's passing in the accumulator, which on each pass of the reduce, so it's going to go over this collection 24 times, because there's 24 items in it. It will pass in the current value and start accumulating. So current value dot year. Because current value, remember, ends up being just another one of those movie objects, except this time it's only got the year property on it. So, and let's do console.log, if I can do this right. So I'm going to see this, 2016 times 22, 24. That's the expected value, right? Nope, that is not where I wanted to go with that command. Copy, paste. And this guy is going to be total years. So if we did this right, oh no, what? Titles is not defined. Oh, that's right, because I switched it to years. Did I muck up anywhere else? No. Okay. Interesting. Does it? Oh. Yeah.
It's concatenating.
Okay. So plus in front of where? And you convert. Yeah.
Well, you're missing your second parameter. So there's just regularity and comma zero.
Yeah. Bam. Why is it still object?
So reducing the second parameter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Needs zero.
This is the initial value. Thank you. Where'd it go? So reduce. Bam. Ha, whew, cool. I'm actually kind of curious. Yeah, if that works, that's gonna. I'm not sure what it's gonna do. It's gonna be another cool thing JavaScript does. But.
Yeah, you should never do that in that instance.
Well, thanks for suggesting bad practice. Yeah.
Well, now what if you do it without parsing it? Because wasn't it?
It was it was an issue with the. Shouldn't. Maybe. No, I'm just gonna.
It's still running because it says stop.
Yeah. We're okay. Nope, I don't want to sign up. Bam. There you go. Yep. So. Yes, I wrap this in parentheses to denote where that ended, so that it recognized that it was it terminated the statement. Yeah. So that's the initial value as well as the reducer that's passed in. So it's just another anonymous function in there. Yeah. So there's a lot you can do with these. As you see, you can sometimes shoot yourself in the foot if you don't actually pay attention to what you're doing some days. Does anybody have any other examples that they may want to run through with this data set that might show off filter mapping or reducing? Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, with the current index thing, I know you said you never used it, but could you sum up the current index? Say, like, you could like take in the current index and use that
Yeah.
as your accumulator?
Um,
Or does it like require, like if you don't do anything with the accumulator, is it going to be mad?
No, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But it needs
It's
that.
going to return the accumulator, so if you do nothing with it, like at the very end.
Oh, I see. The accumulator is just like almost like a pointer.
It's just like a temporary holding value that you
It's
can use or
a
not.
bucket.
yeah. It's a yeah. 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 It's representing the final assignment to total years.
But you have to still take in current value because like reduce is expecting at least 2 parameters.
I don't think.
Null for your second parameter.
There has to be something.
Yeah, the third one is set to be the current index. You
Yeah.
can call it cheese and it's still
Right.
So I think this is a characteristic, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. If you like all JavaScript parameters are optional. So if you send in arguments into a function, you don't need it, even though it specifies that that place is there, it doesn't need to be there, but the order matters. So if you want to only pass in current index and you don't care about an accumulator or the current value, you need 2 empty spaces in order to say this is the current value, current index.
That's because like at the actual language level,
Yeah.
that's the way the function is written.
Correct. Yeah, it's optional, so you don't need to pass it in. But then, what does your reducer do?
It basically says
Yeah.
like if null
Yep. Yeah.
price returns an empty function or something.
Yeah, because you can set this, and then just return current index. That should work, and it should return 23. Nope, it breaks. Never mind. Unexpected token.
So you can't pass in null.
Wonder.
You have to pass it in.
Variable name.
Yeah, I guess you have to do pass in a variable name, but you don't have to do anything with it.
Yeah, just don't make it null.
Yeah. Basically, that's what you do. Cool. Yeah, so unless there's any further questions, I'm going to turn it over to the pizza. Yeah, and that's what this example did, is it broke out the function itself. So it created its own reducer apart from the actual function, and then set it up there. Yeah. So, yep, that's it. Thank you. Okay, thanks, bye.